Welcome. We're really glad you're here. So for the next slide, what you're going to see is what happened this week. So it was an incredibly weird week, wasn't it? We went through this process where there were three hearings in the past week in state parks. There were two hearings, not one, but two hearings on Yom Kippur. And then just on Tuesday, 26 is not that long ago, the Ohio Redistricting Commission at about, 10:30 at night, 11, they finalized new state legislative districts. And many of you will remember that the Ohio Supreme Court ordered them to do this in May of 2022. That means that the Ohio Redistricting Commission did not reconvene until September 13th. You will remember some arm wrestling over who was going to be the chair, and then finally beginning this very compressed hearing. So there just wasn't a lot of transparency in the map making. One of the things that I found the most challenging had to do with so many of us went and testified. And I noticed in the chat, folks saying, hey, I was somebody who went and testified. So many of us testified and tried to influence the process, but all of the negotiation was done out of the public eye. That in fact, they had an opportunity to actually do bipartisan map making in the public eye, but instead chose a plan that protects incumbents and instead chose to create these new maps in private so that we couldn't see what actually happened. Janice, would you like to add to this, please?
Absolutely. First of all, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Janice Brock. I'm the Policy and Advocacy Director for the Ohio Organizing Collaborative, but I also had the wonderful privilege of serving on the steering committee for the Equal Districts Coalition, while also founding Ohio Citizens Redistricting Commission, affectionately known as the OCRC. So had a great time just being able to talk to so many people from all over Ohio and really get their input. And so we were able to develop maps and created a process that we thought would be very a model for what can happen when citizens are in the process. So I'm encouraged about this, even though Tuesday we got the most gerrymandered map that was very evident of a brazen grab of power from our politicians. I know that the people in this room, the people of Ohio, are ready to fight for better maps and a better process. But to add to what Catherine was saying, on Tuesday, they passed these maps. I'm going to drop them in the chat for you, just in case if there is anyone who haven't quite, maybe I can't, it might not let me. But I was going to drop the maps in the chat for anybody who hasn't seen them. But just to give an overview of what those maps, let's see if it works this time.
And Janice, I was going to say, I dropped a link that basically it's the Common Cause Ohio link, and it basically talks about the sweetheart deal at the State House. It gives an overview for people to read later, but also if you scroll down, you can actually find the maps there as well.
Okay, cool. So with those maps, you'll find a Republican to Democratic advantage of like 61 to 38. In the House, you'll find like 23 to 10 Republican advantage in the Ohio Senate. So that just shows, I only say this to just give a breakdown to like the seat share there and what that looks like. But unfortunately, the politicians really just took this process and made sure that they secured things that help them and that works for them. And for folks that's, like me in Akron, Ohio and Summit County, or for those who are, in Hamilton County, we deserve better than that. And so it is important for us to know how long these maps stand for. So for the maps that was just passed on Tuesday, those maps, absent of this reform, those maps would stand until 2032. So we would be locked in to these gerrymandered maps until 2032. So it is extremely, extremely, extremely important that this the Citizens and Not Politicians Amendment is successful, because it would trigger a redraw in 2025. So I want everybody to be encouraged that we have some power here. Even though the politicians did their best to take that away from us on Tuesday, we have an avenue that they haven't seen yet, that we're going to make sure that all Ohioans have an opportunity to get every vote around this state and make sure that they know that Ohio cannot be bought. Ohio cannot be just ruled over by just a few politicians, but the citizens will speak. They spoke in August and they're going to speak in 2024.
And I will say this, you know, I've said this many times, these folks are drunk on power. And what do you do with drunks? You take away their keys. And so with that, we want to give the map making to citizens. So now I would like to introduce former Chief Justice Maureen O'Connor, former Lieutenant Governor Maureen O'Connor, and we'd just like to hear from you. Please go ahead.
Can I jump in real quick with a housekeeping detail? Please put your questions in the Q&A box. That's a little bit easier for us to focus just on one area. So if you have questions, the chat, thank you for putting where you're from in the chat, but questions go in the Q&A. Thank you so much.
Are we ready?
Please.
Okay, great. Well, thank you for the invitation. I'm really pleased that we have such a big audience. And I'm pleased to be here with Sean and give you what is called, or what is billed as, a deep dive into the amendment. The amendment was presented, I'm going to give you the timeline. It was presented in August to the Attorney General. And we know what has happened. It was rejected. The summary was rejected initially. It was then the summary was then modified, edited to meet the I guess I would say the flaws. They weren't really flaws, but in the eyes of the Attorney General, they were flaws. And so a second time, those concerns were addressed, and that map and the summary, or excuse me, that amendment and that summary sits with the Attorney General now, and he has until October 2nd to make a decision with regards to either the acceptance or kicking it back for further, tweaking of the summary. I don't believe that he would do that at this point, but I've been wrong before. Okay, let me go back and tell you a little bit about the history of how this came to be, how the amendment came to be. I think everybody should be on this call, or excuse me, the Zoom, familiar with the previous map that was used in 22 and how that came about. If you recall, the Redistricting Commission, and by the way, the Redistricting Commission, I don't know how basic I need to be because I think you're all informed people, but anyway, Redistricting Commission by Constitution is made up of 7 members: the governor, the Secretary of State, the auditor, the President of the Senate, and the Speaker of the House. They can be on there themselves or they can designate. And then the minority leader in the House and the minority leader in the Senate. So that's 7 members. What do they all have in common? They're all politicians. They are all seeking votes. They are all looking at their career choices and what's necessary going forward. And I think that you have to keep that in mind when we are discussing what happened. I'm not going to go into a deep dive on what happened in 22. Suffice it to say, there were 7 maps presented, 2 for congressional districts, and then 5 for our General Assembly districts. They were all declared to be unconstitutional. Why did we have an election using an unconstitutional map? Because the federal court, a 3-judge panel, 2 out of those 3 judges said that there has to be a map to be used, of course. Well, that's common sense. And map number 3 was going to be the map that would be used, even though it was unconstitutional. They recognized that it was unconstitutional, but it's one of those situations where they said something has to be done. They gave the Redistricting Commission until the end of May to come up with a constitutional map. They, of course, did not. So why would they? They knew that they were going to use map number 3, which was just fine with them, and that's what was utilized. Map number 3, that's why we have the map that we have now, and the districts and the representatives and the senators that we have now. Okay, in my first concurring opinion, back in the first go around with the maps, they were declared unconstitutional, and I wrote a concurring opinion, and I said in that concurring opinion, I recognize that there's a way to address this problem with the Redistricting Commission and how maps are drawn, etc. And it's a citizens initiative. Ohio has this beautiful, wonderful thing called a citizens initiative to amend our Constitution. It's been in our Constitution since 1912. Progressives had a constitutional convention. This was part of what they wanted. The people who voted on those amendments back in 1912 agreed, and that's why we have this constitutional amendment. But going forward, it's been used, and I'm not going to get into the history of how many times it's been used and how many times it's been successful, but we do have this this constitutional amendment power. And that truly is the actual embodiment, I think, of the words "we the people." And I think that is the whole purpose for the ability of a constitutional amendment initiated by we the people. And that's what we've got here. So fast forward, I retire at the end of December because of age requirements. Once you're 70, you cannot run again for office, or excuse me, for judicial office. It's the only office in the state that has an age prescription attached to it. So I intended, and I said that I would work on our redistricting issues. It ramped up very quickly. We were able to attract the attention and the participation of experts from across the country and we were also able to look at other maps that, or excuse me, other constitutional amendments that had been done by previous states. Michigan comes to mind most readily. Over months, and I mean like from February till August, it was devoted to drafting this constitutional amendment. Okay, so we put forth the constitutional amendment. What's the constitutional amendment say? Well, basically, the biggest problem with redistricting right now is the makeup of the Redistricting Commission. So this new amendment would replace the current politician-run redistricting process with a citizen-led commission required to create fair state, legislative, and congressional districts. And one of the things that is prevalent throughout the amendment is transparency. Everything will be done in the open. The selection of the commissioners will be 15 commissioners. They will be 5 Republicans, 5 Democrats, and 5 members who belong to neither majority party. And they will be vetted, and it will be a very thorough vetting. The application process is an open process. Anybody can apply, provided they are not a politician, a former politician, a lobbyist, someone who makes a living, dealing with the government, and someone who is politically active, either on the local or state or national level, or family members of people who I've just described. So there's exclusionary language in there, making those folks ineligible to be part of the Redistricting Commission. How is the redistricting? How are those members selected? We have a panel of retired judges. In other words, men and women who have run for office, of course, in Ohio, and have distanced themselves in their retirement from any political activity. and they will, by volunteering, they will also be vetted, and we will pick 2 from the Republicans and 2 from the Democrats. Excuse me, 2 who have Republican registration and 2 have Democratic registration. I'm not saying that they are from either party, because again, we don't want people who are active in their party. They will select the commissioners. The commissioners, once selected, will be required to hold open to draft put forth a constitution. Okay, so the process on how they put forth that constitution, the constitutional amendment, or excuse me, the districts is pretty basic. And when I say pretty basic, if you keep in mind, transparency is the hallmark of what they will be doing. They will spend a lot of time in front of a camera, all of them. There will be regional meetings that are taking place, and those will be open to the public, and they also will be able to be viewed online. And their deliberations, what happens, the actual map making is required to be open, transparent, and viewed by the public. And there will be absolutely no behind the scenes discussions. There will be no behind the scenes map drawing. And again, there will be the opportunity for individuals to comment on the maps that are proffered. Individuals can proffer maps, and those will be up for consideration by the commission as well. So as I said, it's an extremely transparent operation. The map drawing is something that I think is a refreshing change from what we have had. I believe that it will work. It has worked in other states, variations of it. And I want to assure you that this map making has been tailored for Ohio. It's not something where we just took a constitutional amendment from, another state and just landed it in Ohio. This has been thoroughly drafted, criticized, redrafted, scrutinized, and put forth as the constitutional amendment. I believe that this redistricting commission, if this amendment passes, which I gotta believe it will, because every time this is brought up, there's nothing but positive, comments I hear from the public, and there are people that are eager for this type of a change to happen in the state of Ohio. So why, I see on the slide here, voters should be picking their politicians. Politicians shouldn't be picking their voters. That is the basic concept here. It is something that has been taken away from the people of Ohio because of the gerrymandered districts. If this constitutional amendment passes with this new policy and this new proceedings, then I do believe that it will do away with gerrymandering in the state of Ohio. We will have fair districts, and they will be drawn with the input of individuals and the input of people who are not self-interested. And that's basically what this new or this amendment will do. I have to say that given what happened with the latest go round a couple of days ago, we can see politicians bipartisanly seeking self-interest and putting, I think, party over people, and that will not happen with this new amendment. So with that, thank you.
Thank you so much, Chief. Do you all want me to jump in, or do you have another piece you want to do here before I go right in? All right. So
how about we have a couple questions. I'm wondering, do you want to know what those are, or do you want to present and then we'll go to questions. One of which is, we keep getting asked about Michigan, and I thought maybe the chief would want to talk about what we learned from Michigan or how this is similar or different than Michigan.
Okay, I don't know. I don't know. I'm not going to get into deep detail about what Michigan, they have a different configuration for their commission. One of the beauties of Michigan is that it was challenged in their Supreme Court, and it passed muster by their Supreme Court. And that was an attractive feature for looking at the way Michigan did this. But again, it's not a carbon copy of Michigan. This is an Ohio initiative. This is an Ohio amendment. It's specifically for Ohio, and it's going to work in Ohio.
I think that's exactly right. I think to both talk a little bit about what's happened in other states and why we're so confident that this will end gerrymandering in Ohio. The key features of any successful redistricting process are you need to have a really solid process where politicians aren't rigging the game. You need to have specific and clear rules for everyone to understand this is how maps are going to be evaluated to ensure that they put voters first and that voters can pick their own politicians and we have responsive government. And then to the chief's point, you need to have transparency so that everybody knows they're getting their fair shake and everyone's working with the same set of data and the same set of facts. And so if you have those three pieces, that is how you get to a final outcome that puts the people's first and allows the people to set the direction of their government and to change direction if the people that get elected to office aren't being responsive to what the people need. So we've talked a lot about the process already. I won't repeat all of that, but I think it is worth noting that there will be a very clear and very important prohibition in the Constitution after we pass the Citizens Not Politicians Amendment that bans any sort of map that unfairly favors or discriminates against both a political party and against any particular politicians. When maps are being drawn in those transparent open meetings that the chief talked about, it will be against the rules for them to be looking at folks who are running for office at that time or folks who are in office. When politicians are drawing maps in, say, the last couple of days, and they are very aware of all the people that they're trying to protect and where they live, that is how you get outcomes that put the politicians first, not citizens, and we're going to flip that on its head. We can get into the details if folks want to on some of the details on who is not eligible and who is. I think it is worth noting that the commissioners in that open application process do have to be residents of Ohio in good standing for 6 years. The evaluation in that screening panel, looking at who's not eligible, so lobbyists, big political donors of a partisan stripe, folks who are running for office as partisans, like those are all taken into consideration so that we have actual citizens first, not politicians or their designees who might be working on their behalf. And then party affiliations, to make sure that the folks who are registered or who are the Republican designees, who are the unaffiliated independents, the Democrats, the Constitution is specific in how to evaluate folks' public records and their backgrounds. That specificity is important because we know that politicians in the past in Ohio and elsewhere have across party lines have tried to rig the game. And so the constitutional amendment is direct and straightforward and specific on a lot of things that matter based on how we've seen folks try to rig the game in the past. And then in terms of the rules that I mentioned, some of these, there's a non-negotiable clarity that the maps that get drawn have to follow the Voting Rights Act. That isn't the case in all states around the country, and so it's really important to make that very clear. Right, like a lot of you have seen the Supreme Court cases that have been around gerrymanders in Alabama and Louisiana, so it is very important and that we affirm that and reaffirm that here in the Citizens Not Politicians Amendment. We've talked about not benefiting any party or politicians, and there are clear and specific rules for how to make sure that citizen or that communities of interest are honored, are collected, and recorded during the commission process, and clarity on how to use those communities of interest as the people provide that input during the hearing process into the maps themselves. And the last thing I'll lift up, and then we can go to Jen and Mia and Catherine and other questions. There are specific and direct rules for how to, if there are concerns about the maps that the commission creates, that there's a clear process and rules that everyone understands for what will happen in that judicial process. So that is all specified in the amendment on purpose, so that we know that we won't have a situation where everyone knows that maps don't follow the Constitution and there's not a way to get to maps that do comply. It will be a direct and straightforward and articulated process, and that's really important given what we've seen in the last couple of years. So one thing I will just offer from the campaign side, and then we can jump into the details. We are going to talk about the details. We're going to talk to anyone who will listen about the amendment that we're trying to pass. But as advocates, as folks who are taking out time on their lunch break on a Thursday, we are nerds, and that's great. We are also trying to win the votes and go campaign and get signatures from people who aren't nerds and from folks who maybe haven't read all of the amendment yet. We're going to be talking about them, or we're going to be talking to them about that for the next 18 months. What they may want to know the details, but what they really want to know is that this is going to put them first, and this is going to unrig the game so that it's not about politicians. So there is a time and a place like this where we go super deep, and then there will be a time when we go super clear on what the outcomes are and why this matters and the outcomes. And so we will be talking about that. I will be a broken record on that, and we're going to be talking a whole lot as we go in over the next 14 months. But I will pause there, and we may want to go to questions. And then I know there's ways for everyone here on this webinar to be a part of what's coming next. So I'll just pause there, and we can go into the Q&A.
Thank you, Sean and Chief. We've got a number of questions that I think are great. One has to do with, there's kind of two that are about kind of gaming the system, one of which is running out the clock, which we saw a lot of. Another is about this merry-go-round where the Supreme Court were denying these maps and that those orders were getting ignored. So can you just talk about, this is a detailed policy that's really got all kinds of safeguards around it, right? To make sure that bad actors cannot prevail. Can you talk about whether it's time or the various rules that are in that you feel will really protect voters' rights here?
I think, I'm just going to take a stab at it, and then Sean can, because I'll be very brief. I think that it will, the title itself, Citizens Not Politician, I think says it all. And when we talk about citizens, you notice it's not voters, not politicians, it's citizens, because we want everybody, whether you're a registered voter or whether you are not, whether you're registered and you don't vote, we want all those people to be aware that there's a new game in town on how the legislature, how the legislative districts are drawn, and just as importantly, how the congressional districts are drawn. And we want that to be incentive for people to vote. So that's one of the reasons why we like the word citizens and not just voters, because it's important. This is a message for all citizens. How do we ensure that this is going to be above board? I guess maybe that's to sum it up what your question is. It's because it's going to be transparent. All of the selection process will be transparent. All of the conversations, all of the deliberations, etc. It's all transparent. Right now, you don't have that. All of a sudden, if you remember in 22, I remember they got, this close to having a map that they could all agree on. And all of a sudden it was too close to the deadline, according to Senate President Huffman, and he whips out a map and he says, this is the one we're going to use because we don't have time to do anything else. Where'd that map come from? Obviously, it was not vetted, it was not in public, etc. So that won't be possible. That won't be possible. And here's the other thing. The commissioners are required to disclose if anybody approaches them to talk about the Redistricting Commission, to talk about their work. If a lobbyist, a legislator, a member of the public tries to lobby them on a map or lobby them on a concept or whatever, they are required to disclose that conversation, that contact. And that is a safeguard that's built into the requirements or the criteria for our commissioners. So I think the transparency and the fact that the commission will be made up of 5 Ds, 5 Rs, and 5 members who are non-members of either majority of party, I think is the security that we need, the assurance that we need going forward.
I think that's right. And I also think there are specific provisions in the amendment that deal with gamesmanship that politicians sometimes play. And also just like sometimes well-intentioned and honest impasses or disagreements. So anyone can read the full text of the measure and a summary of the measure at citizensnotpoliticians.org/petition. For those who want to get into what happens if there's an impasse or the Citizens Commission can't reach a consensus, bullet number 32, the summary explains the process and what happens there, so that commissioners will have an opportunity to say, hey, this is what I would do if this is the map that best reflects the people of Ohio. There's a process for them voting on that to get to a final answer, so that the people can vote on the people who represent them in the legislature.
Thank you for that. We have, I'm looking at buckets of questions. We have several questions that were about communities of interest and how those are defined and how that plays a part in this policy. We've also had several questions about communities of color and their rights to representation. So can you answer both of those concepts?
Yes. So go ahead. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was going to say that communities of interest are honored and protected in the text of the measure. For folks who are reading along with the summary statement, you can look at bullet points 23 through 29 on communities of interest, including communities of color. So I think, one, there's clear requirements that communities of color not be broken up, or there should not be cracking or packing of voters in a way that diminishes their political power. That is very clear and important. There's a long bipartisan history of that kind of nonsense in America, and that will not be allowed. And then 2, on communities of interest, I think the really great thing about the work that's been done in the Ohio amendment is that it honors actual communities of interest that leaders and citizens from the communities put forward, and it also has safeguards for politicians who might try to use that language to create fake communities that advance their political interests. And so both of those things are articulated and contemplated, because actual communities of interest are very important. Fake ones that politicians might come up with to advance their parochial goals are less awesome. So that's what I would point to.
And I think it's important to say that how will these communities of interest be identified? Through testimony. People will come to the commission when they hold the hearings. And again, they're going to hold hearings in all 4 quadrants of the state and a hearing in the middle of the state. So there's going to be 5 opportunities for hearings on the maps. And there will be testimony, and that testimony, again, will be transparent. Everybody will hear it. And that testimony will give the commission information to support why this group that they're representing is a community of interest. Now, that can be people who are advocating for ethnic or based on their some people will come forward and say, I don't want my village. I want my village. I live in a village and I want my village to be not divided in any way, to be in one district. And here's the reason why. And so that kind of testimony will come before the board, or excuse me, the commission as well. So anything that a citizen wants to say to the commission that will help them when it comes to that they will then identify as important touchstones for the creation of the map will come about based on testimony. And then that will be something that the map makers, who will be independent people, they're not, I don't know who they are right now. They're going to be selected once all the hearings are done and the criteria is agreed upon by the commission. They will hire a map makers. And as I said, the tedious job of making maps will be done in public. And the public will be able to view that and view the work product. And there will be then hearings on the work product. So not just what goes into the map initially, but there will be critiquing then of the work product that's put forth by the commission. All citizens involved and all transparent.
Thank you so much for that. There's lots of questions about party designation and especially how independent would be defined. So could you talk about that piece?
That's in the, Sean, go ahead.
No, I was hoping you would filibuster for 20 seconds as I pulled up the actual language from the amendment. So give me,
okay.
I was going to answer with specifics. So yeah.
All right. So the question is, how would you repeat that, Jen? How do you what?
How are we defining independent?
Independents. Yeah. They're people that are not a Republican or not a Democrat. Okay. They might belong to the Green Party or, some other, smaller, party that's not designated. But they're not a D or they're not an R. Or they can be totally independent and not belong to any party. But they have to be a voter and they have to have resided in Ohio. I think it says for 6 years, and vote, and not be a lobbyist, not be a relative of lobbyists, not be a politician, not be a relative of a politician, exclusion, so that there is no incentive. That's the important thing here. We want people who have no incentive to do anything other than create a map for the benefit of Ohio and Ohioans. This map that they passed the other day, they're touting it that this will be in place for 8 years, and how great that is, et cetera. I don't know how they get to 8 years, but anyway, there's language in this amendment that says if this is passed, those maps are null and void. The ones that would be in place in 2024 are null and void, and it will be it'll be a new day. That map will be on the scrap heap, and we'll go forward with this new process.
So I think
on the specific points.
Yeah, go ahead.
Of affiliation or non-affiliation. So the factors that are contemplated. So A, the screening panel is empowered to show some judgment and common sense on. It's not a very specific list, but the specific things that are noted in the details are voting records in partisan primaries, political contributions, campaign activities, and then other indications of partisan affiliation. I would also note that the constitutional amendment does not assume that a person is of one party or unaffiliated or not for the duration of their life. We all grow and we learn and we change. And so we are not branded as one thing forever. That's not how humans work. And if folks want to dig into the details in the petition, I'd point you to point 4 in the summary, and then the corresponding section of the full text.
Here's how, I would envision something working where somebody wants to say, hey, I'm an independent, or I'm a Democrat or a Republican, and I haven't been politically active. And yet their lawn is peppered with signs, during the previous elections. And the people, the potential candidates for the commission will all be known before they're selected. There'll be a list of people who are under consideration, and there's nothing to stop, and we would welcome a neighbor to not come forward and say, wait a second, Jen Miller's not an independent, because every election cycle her whole yard, you can't even see the grass for the signs. That person would not, first of all, that person would have been dishonest in their application. And secondly, that type of activity will preclude your involvement.
Thank you for that. Still lots of questions about independent. The good news is this is just one of many programs we're going to have where we talk about the details. Real quick, I want to talk about how lobbyists are defined. There's a lot of people asking, and I think I can just assure people that if you're a member of the League of Women Voters or Common Cause, that you're not a lobbyist. A lobbyist is someone who is a registered lobbyist and has to fill out paperwork with the state of Ohio. So unfortunately, Catherine Terser, myself, and probably several others on this call, Janice and others, we could not be commissioners because we are technically lobbyists, but you members of our organizations are not. But we've gotten probably 20 questions about the AG. So can we talk about our plan for dealing with the AG since, we have happily been collecting these signatures in the field, right? And this is one of our first parts of the obstacle course. This is the first part of the obstacle course for getting on the ballot. Can you talk about what our plan is to handle the AG if he continues to deny our proposals?
I mean, our plan is for Monday to get the letter back that we've addressed all of his concerns, and then we're on to the ballot board. I think that is the plan. If people be silly, then then there are ways to deal with that through the courts. But our plan is to get an affirmative letter back, and then on to the ballot board, and then on to signatures.
Great. Thank you for that. And there's also some question and concern. Could the Secretary of State or the ballot board cause, challenges, and do we have plans for that as well?
I think politicians do silly things, but we feel very confident that this fully complies with the single subject rules of the state. So that doesn't mean that there won't be silliness, but it also doesn't mean that we're not going to be collecting signatures soon.
Great.
And,
all right.
I also want to add there, well, first of all, thank you to everybody who has been out there pounding the pavement or standing at a shopping center or whatever, collecting the signatures. I know it's a little, I don't want to say despairing, because it's not. This is the process. We know it's the process. We're all big boys and girls. We know, this is how political process works. So I'm not worried about it. I have faith that the Attorney General will see that our latest work product is meets with the standard, which is a true representation of what the amendment says. And the next, if that's the case, which I hope and pray that it is, the ballot board, however it works out with the ballot board, and their first decision has to be, is this a single subject? We were very careful in drafting the amendment, though, that every part of it is connected to the single purpose of creating a method for the creation of districts, both legislative and constitutional. And that was the purpose of it. We were very purposeful in how it was drafted. So I don't anticipate that there will be a declaration that this is more than one subject.
Great, thank you.
Presuming we prevail at the ballot board, I believe that those people opposed to this constitutional amendment will sue in the Supreme Court, just as it was done with the reproductive rights amendment that's going to be on the ballot this November, that went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court will then have to determine whether they can affirm the work of the ballot board, or whether they will say, no, it's more than one subject. So we know that just getting through the ballot board will not necessarily be cause for celebration, and the path is over now. Let's go collect those signatures. We know that that there are possibilities that we will end up in the Supreme Court over the single subject rule.
We've had several questions about can computers make the maps? Will computers be part of making maps? So would you jump in on that?
I think computers are great tools, but humans are who need to be drawing maps and evaluating the testimony that come from the people who show up at all the hearings. Like, it is an abomination and immoral the way that all of the citizen input has been ignored. Computers are great. That's how we make all sorts of great documents and can evaluate things, but humans are making the choices.
And humans are making the choices on the criteria that is going to be used to make those maps. And the map making programs, I guess I would call them, I've never seen anybody sit down and make a map. It just hasn't been something that I've been exposed to. And I'm sure that those were done in rooms that I had no access to. But anyway, the criteria has to be considered and established, and then the map is made from that. That is, really important. Important to realize that it's not just going to be folks sitting down there looking at the state of Ohio and then just drawing squiggly lines around. That's just not the way it is. There is a computer element to this. There are programs, but those programs are developed based on the criteria that is established by the commission.
Thank you so much. So we've probably gotten about 10 questions about communications. Like, what's the communications plan? How are we going to help voters understand this? How are we going to make sure we have enough money to do it? All those different things. This is Sean's sweet spot. Do you want to jump in here, Sean?
You are going to hear a lot from this campaign, and we are going to ramp up communications when when we're on the streets to go collect the signatures. So stay tuned. I promise you won't wonder what's going on. We got to get through these administrative political hurdles and then rock and roll.
So we'll have a full, robust budget and smart communication plans based on polling, right? And analysis as to what voters understand or what drives them, right? And we'll be able to train all of our folks in the field who are collecting signatures and then also working on GeoTV.
We are here to win.
Now, we also keep getting questions about timing. So when we were on the merry-go-round of the Supreme Court knocking down maps and then the legislature continuing to just ignore that, everybody wanted to get out their clipboards, and we didn't yet, right? And now we have some other questions that are like, now there's this big vote this fall. Are we taking away energy from that? So can you just talk about the timing of trying to get this done? Why now is the moment?
Sean, you're muted.
Unmute.
Yeah, you're muted.
My bad. We are ready to collect signatures just as soon as we can clear these hurdles. So we got to get through AG piece and then ballot board. when that happens will just depend on, you know, if there are any games. Like, we're certainly not hoping for any games that get played at the ballot board, but, you know, we'll be out the day after that. The deadline for signatures is early July next summer, and so everything is optimized for that. So yes, we'd love to be out there right now because we're mad and we saw what happened Tuesday, but we got to get through these steps. And my hunch is we're still going to be mad in a couple of weeks to go out and do it.
So we have to do lots of big things at once. It's just part of being democracy advocates. It's part of our work here in Ohio. It is going to take all of us. And with that, I would love to hand it over to Mia to talk about ways that you can get more involved.
Sure, and I'm going to add myself to the spotlight. Well, thank you guys all so much for being here. And the fact that we have, 350 people on a webinar in the middle of the day on a Thursday shows what energy there is for this reform. And that is the reason that we're doing this. We couldn't do this unless Ohioans were pumped and psyched and educated and ready to get out and collect signatures. So it's not an exaggeration to say that you're central to this effort and that we're going to need a really well-organized petition army. Everybody who's on this call, if you can think of yourself as, the center of a hub and you're going to recruit 10 people and each of those people are going to recruit 10 people and we're going to have a petition distribution and collection system and trainings and webinars and the whole 9 yards, because this is a heavy lift. But with everybody on board, we know that we can do it. It is going to be different from 2015 and 2018, where these were compromise measures, where those were yes votes on both the Republican and Democratic slate card. And yes, those measures passed with over 70%, but because they were yeses on those both slate cards. We're going to have a lot of opposition. We're going to have a lot of money against us. And so we're going to need folks who are out there just spreading the word about why this is important, about, doing speakers bureau, writing letters to the editor on social media. So whether or not you want to be out with a clipboard, you are still going to be really important by, spreading the word about this campaign. And we're going to need folks to advocate for a yes vote. So we're ready, with some trainings to get started. Again, we will send you these slides. You'll have these links. There's a petition circulation training on the 17th at 6 and on the 26th of October at noon. Of course, Fair Districts has a monthly huddle, all volunteer huddle. The next one for us is October 11th at 6 p.m. And we're going to specifically do a little bit of a deep dive on Dave's redistricting with Trevor Martin and Martin Marazzi are going to tell us, how do we analyze maps? How do we look at maps in Dave's and figure out, what's going on with them and compare them to other maps. We do have, we have all of our Fair Districts has all of its previous webinars on our YouTube channel. You can find those there. So, whether you're working with equal districts, with Ohio Organizing Collaborative, with, Fair Districts, Common Cause, League of Women Voters, ACLU, whatever group you're working with, we're all going to be working for citizens, not politicians, pushing that ballot measure over the finish line to a big win. But make sure you're signed up with, one of our emails. We'll send that out to make sure that you are getting updates about how to be involved and how to be an important part. Yes, we will have swag. I am going to answer that so that it will be true. Volunteers will have materials to make sure that, they have what they need to make sure that they can do a really good job collecting signatures. And I'll hand it back over to Jen and Sean and the chief.
Well, I'd like to close by answering one question I just noticed here. It'd be great if we had national attention on this. I assure you, there's national attention on this constitutional amendment and what will happen in November of 24. I have already interviewed many times, and there have been articles in newspapers and about Ohio and how we're putting forth this effort. The focus will be on Ohio when it comes to. I think we might be the only state that would be having a measure for. And keep in mind, not all states have the luxury of a citizens' initiative to change their constitution. Ohio is very fortunate at that, and I think in the November election of 24, we probably will be the only state that is making an effort here to have a citizens commission and how we draw districts. Ohio will be we will be special. Let me assure you.
And with that, I just want to express my profound gratitude for Janice from Ohio Organizing Collaborative, Catherine and Mia and Trevor from Common Cause Ohio, Colin Marazzi, who is answering lots of questions from ACLU, of course, the Chief Justice, and Sean from Citizens Not Politicians. We're going to have lots of good fun together. We are going to get on the ballot and we are going to win friends. So make sure you sign up for everything and we will do this together. Lots more programming coming. Thank you. Happy Thursday.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Look out
Thank
for
you
that
so much.
follow-up. It'll include links
Yes.
and recording and everything. Thanks
You're
again.
going to get a follow-up. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.